Thank you, Lindy, for those headlines there. Of course, we keep tracking the story for you of the repatriation of 122 South Africans. They are leaving as we speak to go out there. Of course, Cindy Suetwala out at the airport. Of course, Lindy Serame will keep you updated when we have a bulletin at 10 o'clock to see how that mission is going. But of course, tonight our Frank Talk is with Sandile Zungu from a BBC president. Sandile, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me here, JJ.
Wonderful, and thank you for hosting us at the summit last week. You know, I don't want to be pessimistic, but there are so many summits, very many summits, left, right, and center. What was different about this summit, this particular business summit? What was a big takeaway that can say this was not at all a waste of time?
First of all, there is pessimism overall about people in discussion. But if you consider where our country comes from, we're a product of jaw, people screaming at each other, but around the table. Then war. We're renowned for being a country in conversation with itself in search for solutions. So as a Black Business Council, when we resolved that this summit will be annual, it was in a remembrance where we come from as a country. So let's never lose patience with ourselves in discussion, in conversation. With regards to this summit specifically, there is a whole lot of topical issues, contemporary issues, where Black business need to be in conversation. First of all, there is this Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We're a nation of 60 million people, give or take, and north of us, within the continent, there is more than 19 times our population. So it is obvious that we need to converse among ourselves on how to take full advantage of the opportunity that intercontinental free trade agreement has to offer. So it was one of the issues under discussion. We think we emerged wiser as the Black Business Council. Fourth Industrial Revolution is a topical issue. Everyone, just before the news, you were asking, are we ready? That's a real vexing question. Is Black business community ready to take full advantage of what Fourth Industrial Revolution has to offer? So we had to agitate government, we had to lobby and advocate that we need to get out of the starting blocks very fast because our people are ready. They want to take full advantage. There are limitations in the current, in the status quo. The issue of localization, rebuilding our industrial capacity, capacitating small, medium sector, business sector, is something that is very critical to job creation, very critical to economic growth. We had to discuss that. We brought all the big honchos, ranging from the ministers relevant to that sector to directors general, as well as thought leaders in that specific area. So we are quite satisfied as a Black Business Council that the topics for discussion were very relevant, and people who participated in the summit felt enthused that they never wasted their time, and they are more ready than the peers who were not there to take full advantage.
Let's talk about a few of these things, starting with what we would consider the state of Black business. If we were talking 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, we would have been discussing the latest BEE deal, right? This is what's happening in this particular sector. We will be talking the BEE charter of that sector, financial sector, ICT sector. That seems to have gone mute, or at least not then being accentuated a lot in the public discourse. And I'm wondering whether that silence or that quietness or indifference, if you like, about the empowerment space, right, is congruent to the change that either has already happened, or saturation, or even maybe, you know, exhaustion. People maybe are exhausted of the. Can you just focus on that, the state of black business and the state of empowerment? What would be your the BBC stance of where we are in as far as empowerment is concerned? Basically, sharing of the economy or the economic pie.
Well, it's a very interesting question you're asking. Let's start with where we are. The economy is firmly in white hands in South Africa. People don't like us to talk in black and white terms. They prefer that we
mollycoddle and put it nicely.
But we cannot. Even if we wish, some among us would love to not talk black or white, but to talk South African. But the reality on the ground is that the economy is firmly in white hands, both in terms of ownership as well as management, as well as other matters ancillary, such as supplier development, procurement, even CSI. Projects that are closer to the hearts of South African, white South Africans, get a bigger allocation of CSI, discretionary CSI from corporate South Africa. But let me not digress. When you look at transactions, black people who participate in transactions don't want their names mentioned in transactions.
Seriously?
Yeah,
that's a new phenomenon.
No, they don't. They'll rather keep quiet. Why? Because
they do quiet.
They're scared of being called usual suspects. They're scared of being harassed. There was a time when you announce a transaction, makes front page of the business report or business day. Believe it or not, by 12 o'clock you'll have got a call from some agent within SARS, just harassing you about your state of compliance and asking you questions. You can actually see they're reading headlines. And, this is usual suspect, surely he's got money, let's check. So people say, look, no, what?
I would rather do my things quietly.
Do things quietly. I've got nothing to prove. Let me just create wealth, make an impression on those around me, whether my employees or people that do business with, and have an impression on society. So the conscience of black entrepreneurs has not diminished, but they'll prefer to remain, call it anonymous, for fear of being attacked by their own. But secondly, just the quality and the volume of corporate transactions in South Africa have diminished a bit. But it's a sign of the times. The economy is not performing well. The mergers and acquisitions have basically scaled down quite significantly. Notwithstanding, it is not true that there are no transactions. Just during our summit, we were very privileged in that the Minister for Trade and Industry and Commerce, Minister Patel, announced at our summit that they struck a deal with PepsiCo. One of the key terms to that deal was empowerment of the Workers' Trust.
All right, I want to come back to that a little bit after the break, because I want us to stay with this thing about BEE transactions and BEE overall, right? There was a very disturbing report that came out last year from the Ministry of Labour. It's an annual report that talks about, employment equity in the workplace. Terrible. I mean, it's talking about 70% of new appointments and promotions still being to white people. 25 years on. I mean, I just don't know whether we have strategies to deal with that. So I want to stay with that subject a little, then we can go to what's happening in terms of the economy, current transactions, and so on. We're talking to Sandile Zungu. The BBC hosted a summit last week, a business summit, an annual business summit, and he is sharing with me some of what came out of there as we look at perspectives on empowerment, on the economy, and so on. So stay tuned for more after the break. All right, good evening and welcome back to our Frank Talk tonight with Sandile Zungu, the president of the BBC. The BE landscape, I'm very concerned about it, because you'd remember At last year's summit, there was a big discussion about the black industrialists. In fact, even in our conversation when you came here for the first time last year, we talked about whatever happened to the black industrialist program. Because a lot of people are seeing it as almost if you like, advanced BEE, to say, listen, we can't just do small bits and pieces here. Let's just get 100 industrialists, almost manufacture industrialists, forgive the pun about it, right? What has happened to that? And did this arise somewhere in your conversations, say, with the Minister of Trade and Industry?
Yes. The Minister of Trade and Industry surprised us. And he's got all the statistics at the fingertips. He surprised us in that in the last couple of years, since the Black Industrialist Program was conceptualized and put to place, almost 30 billion rands from the IDC as well as DTI, and I suppose some other agencies of DTI, has gone towards the Black Industrialist Program.
30 billion?
Yes. And he had actually challenged me quite a few weeks ago that when they reach a certain milestone, he challenges me to slaughter a bull for him, a cow for him. And however, the numbers seem to suggest that this thing is working. Believe it or not, but still people begrudge the fact that only 30 billion rands. I wonder how much of that will have gone to the so-called black industrialists, in any case, irrespective of the program. But let's accept that the creation of this program has given impetus to this class of industrialists. And so we can give credit to it. It's working. We need to encourage more, and we need to give additional support to those industrialists, because some of them obviously need coaching. They need assistance in terms of access to markets.
Just beyond the sense of how many there are. They had a target of 100.
So it seems to me that it's more than 100 that are in that program. It's quite a substantial number. Like I said, it may be a hodgepodge collection of data. It falls under Black Industrialist Program. But let's give the minister and the department the due benefit of doubt. That is the Black Industrialist Program. We need to encourage them to do better and to possibly introduce the qualifying criteria that will say, this has made a difference.
Do you think there's enough focus on corporate South Africa and its embracing of transformation? And I'm talking here of granular statistics. I mean, I've just given you before the break the statistics from the Labour Department on employment equity, which looks horrific, right? If you look at the JSE listings in terms of, or rather ownership of black enterprises on the JSE, or even on the alternative JSE, alternative stock exchange, they look like we're still in 1980.
Look, black economic empowerment, especially the ownership side of it, is a new side of struggle. It's not going to be an easy concession by those who don't see value in it. There's a lot, even in the political left, who believe that empowerment must be about broad base, about ensuring that people have got roof over their heads, they've got bursary schemes to send their kids to university, and the workers have representation on the boards of companies. There is a section within the progressive sector of our political landscape who really begrudge individual black entrepreneurs, who really do. They would rather not have them. They would rather have the spoils shared by amorphous entities.
People. Like what some corporates have done, instead of proper BA transactions, they've said, here's a staff scheme with people holding 3%, 2%, and people will never make an impact in decision making.
Absolutely. So that in part, that's what we are dealing with. People who want to see empowerment, but who don't like to see the model of empowerment that we stand for or that we advocate. And then if you talk about the spirit of empowerment is lost. It is lost. You know, Madiba, when he bequeathed to us a democracy, and he expected that we would progress from political transformation to economic transformation, where black people will have a bigger share, a bigger slice of the economy, both in terms of management and ownership.
Yeah.
But what is happening now is that corporates don't want to see that happening, and the numbers talk for themselves.
Yes.
You know, if they have to be forced to do it, they really just want to tick the boxes, show us the score, the balance scorecard. Just tick this box here, tick this box there, and get a level 1. And you ask yourself, this company which has got level 1,
yeah. They found a way to crook the system to get a level 1, even though they are involving no black people in decision making.
What a fricadillo is happening here? But this company has got no real recognizable empowerment characters who drive the transformation, but they are level 1, and they compete with emerging black corporates who are 100% owned, small and new entrants, and they win hands down all the time. So the truth of the matter is that the spirit of empowerment is lost. Someone has got to get back to the ring here and encourage South Africans.
So what's the strategy? Because I'm worried, and please help me if I'm being again pessimistic, but I'm worried that the instrument to get all these things to be aligned seems to always find themselves having to fix the instrument. Now you've got someone who has your secretary of a BBC, they've gone now to start a new business forum now. NAFCOC, same story. That one, we don't even talk about it. I can tell you now that if NAFCOC was in the news next week, because they're fighting over investments. I was fascinated with what you said at the summit, by the way, about why BBC decided not to have an investment vehicle. But that's actually it's almost like we're defeated. Because actually BBC should be having that investment vehicle so that you can be able to keep up the good work you're doing. But you had to do that because the track record of such investment vehicles within NAFCOC and others end up people fighting over the crumbs when the bigger economy is, as you are saying, continues to be in wide hands. Tell me where we are in this, if you like, business unity to be able to push one, or in fact a united voice about what needs to be done to rescue this economy.
Well, first of all, the main apex organizations in South Africa, being the Black Business Council and BUSA, have thought their relationships. And we're getting on quite well. Even at a level of personalities, I think there's a proper camaraderie that we cannot deny. But most importantly, it's not about personalities. It's about the constituency. This social partner called business that we represent. It's very important that business endeavors to talk with one voice because our counterparties, labor, communities and government, are quite strong social partners. So unless we talk with one voice, we don't contradict one another. The business community will be a loser, and as such, South Africa as a whole will be a loser. So we are quite determined to work together with BUSA, and there are certain programs that we have identified as worthy of a joint effort. The truth of the matter is that this is a democracy, and we cannot stand against anyone breaking away and say, I'm forming my own organization. And as a Black Business Council, we have resolved that we will not waste our energies trying to bring people back in the fold. We know exactly what we need to be doing. We know what our constituency expects of us. We know what South Africa expects of us. And let's be single-mindedly focused on that. Along the way, we'll meet our adversaries and we'll drink coffee with them, embrace them and say, come back to the fold. You are needed here. than outside. The model that we chose as a Black Business Council, by the way, JJ, the one of saying every year, let's go to our members and sing for our lunch and say, you want us to represent you, you must fund us.
Yeah.
If you don't believe that we are delivering value to you, you'll obviously vote with your feet and not renew your membership subscription or leave us because we're not delivering value to you.
Yeah.
Now, we'll go to corporate South Africa from time to time and say, please fund this program. And they will ask us questions, but we don't like your posture here, we don't like your posture there. And we'll justify ourselves and we'll win their hearts and minds as well as their pockets. That accountability is very important. Now, when you have got your own endowment as a business organization, you've got your own balance sheet, you've got your own transactions that are giving you cash flows. What stops you from, for lack of a better word, from really foot-sucking your own members? Because you don't need them.
How many members do you have, though?
We have in excess of 50 members.
50? These are corporations?
These are
small business?
Corporates, business organizations, professional organizations.
I see. And you are saying you're not worried about the new organization. It looks like they're trying to say they're not in competition with you. They're not a black business. The one that's led by Josie Bulel. You know it. You watched the show 2 weeks ago.
Well, I mean, George is a friend of mine, and so is Silo. I mean, even Juju at the summit was poking fun at them. But they will come back. I mean, they're good guys. You
want them back in the fold. You don't want them to organize a different sector that maybe you're not organizing.
I admire them. They've got intellect and they've got personality.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk about embracing them, bringing them back in the
All right, let's, after the break.
Shooting down at them.
Perfect. After the break, I want us to talk about the economy now, right? The economy is in a recession. What does this mean, right, in your understanding about interventions that must be made to take us out of, because this has been a cycle probably lasting more than a decade or more, right, in terms of just a poor growth rate and so on and so on. And also, is there a contradiction between pushing those initiatives to bring the economy up and still pursuing issues of transformation? Manuel said something interesting about the contradictions. Then I would like to hear your views about it. We're talking to Sandile Zungu. After the break, we carry on with that conversation. Stay tuned.
Recession is the critical indicator that suggests that the economy is not growing, and this low growth is the worst for the economy since the global economic crisis. So we are indeed in crisis, and the coronavirus is already having a huge impact on the economy. We're just looking at the aviation this morning. The demand for travel, air travel, has declined by 5%, and there could be a decline of Chinese tourists, leading to job losses of around 1,000. And we're already estimating that the tourist industry is going to lose 200 million already. And this is one of the industries that we've identified as government as our growth sector.
All right, welcome back to your view with me on Koputse. JJ Tabane, we're coming to you live from Linden here in Johannesburg. Our Frank Talk tonight on this Business Tuesday is with the president of the BBC. The economy in absolute deep trouble. What's your perspective, first of all, about what needs to be done? I mean, people can analyze to death about why we are where we are. That's not going to necessarily help us. What are the one or two big things we need to be doing to intervene to make sure that the growth trajectory can change?
Number one, you must fix Eskom. Eskom is the economy. You know, without Eskom, there's no economy. We become, you know, a banana economy.
Yeah.
So
You're going to have to order generators, man.
you've got to fix Eskom. The infrastructure for transmission is there. There's no question about it. It's one of the best, if not the best, in the continent. And it's waiting for reliable transmission. The installed generational capacity is great. It needs to be maintained so that it's available, it's reliable, and it fulfills its potential. All the restructuring that must happen must be to augment what already exists. And when you do that, and in addition to that, you introduce the renewables, solar, wind, within the context of a just transition, then not only will you bring this nascent industry into maturity, and with that, job creation. And Eskom is very important. Number two, there are sectors that have been identified which require almost like minimal skilling. Tourism, even uneducated, even the most downtrodden of our rural poor can participate in the tourism sector. And those are people who need that hope more than the rural counterparts. So get that tourism ramped up. It's not just about teaching people how to do crafts, but also setting up tourism infrastructure near where they live and supporting them with access to markets, access to capital as well. If you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, it's a low-hanging fruit. There's been talk about allocating the high demand frequency spectrum. For many years now, it's become a cliche, 4IR. There's not going to be 4IR with that spectrum. At least there's not going to be 4IR to the scale that we hype it with that allocation of spectrum. So ICASA must just get out of the starting blocks. All this warring and capture of that industry by dominant interests have got to come to a stop for the benefit of South African people.
Absolutely. I want to take one or two of those issues you are raising, starting with Eskom. My friend Sandile Zungu, who was your program director this week, says, just tell me when you're going to switch off, and I'll be fine. In fact, Bruce Whitfield, who's a colleague on 702 this afternoon, saying the problem is reliability. It's not that they must fix the thing, they must maintain. Everybody understands that. Like any other machinery, you've got to at some point do without your car for a day or two because it's in service.
Absolutely.
So why can't Eskom say, and I want to know whether you share that sentiment, just have a timetable. Not, oh, now we're on stage 4 to 3, oh, sorry, we're not on stage 4, we're now on stage 6 today, oh, no, by the way, we're not going to load shed anymore. That's chaos. Right. With all the reasons that are there that we understand there must be load shedding, at least for now, they have started well by telling us we must just expect it for the next 18 months. That's not enough certainty of planning and so on. Because if that was certainty, then industries wouldn't be declining, manufacturing wouldn't be coming to a grinding stop, etc., because of load shedding. Load shedding should not come into the picture if you know when to expect it. Is that something that you guys have taken up with Eskom on a serious note?
Well, I'm an engineer, so at least I don't need to be persuaded about the need to plan your maintenance. And when you have planned maintenance, I mean, I worked in the plant, in the mining sector and manufacturing. You plan, this unit is going to come off, you're going to strip the pumps, and check on the valves and listen to the noises. Even if it's not broken down, because you want to avoid unplanned breakages. Now, if you don't do maintenance, you will be surprised because some units are going to collapse when you least expect them. If we believe the narrative that comes from Eskom, that's exactly where they are now. Where, for example, today, the ramping up from from stage 2 to stage 4 could have been attributed to some unplanned breakages in the nuclear site at Quebec, I'm told. Would they have anticipated that? Would they have planned for it? No. It surprised them as well. So the idea of there will be no power on Tuesdays for the next year in Branston and in Waterkloof on Fridays for the next year is pie in the sky. It's not possible. It's not possible.
Because of accidental break. But accidental breakdowns should be exceptions, not the rule.
And also, I think even if you were to, I'm just guessing, that even if you were to say Branston, you've got no power on Tuesdays every day, you possibly have to shut down the whole of Sandton and Johannesburg to really qualify for stage 2. So, I mean, imagine if there's no power in the whole of Johannesburg just to satisfy the demand for stage 2 load shedding. It will be chaotic. So that's why you have to plan this unit down Branston East, Waterkloof, and at the same time Nottingham Road in KwaZulu-Natal, at the same time Uppington in Northern Cape, because you have to stagger them, because the impact on regional, provincial economies have got to be managed as well. So my posit is that we've got to give unconditional support to the Eskom team, irrespective of who is at the helm now. Because if they are promising to fix the generational capacity for during the next 18 to 24 months.
Did they say 24 now?
Someone mentioned 24, I think in Parliament.
Oh, no.
So let's give it a benefit of the doubt and say 18 months. But if it exceeds 24 months, so be it. But at least we know for the next 24 months we're going to suffer this pain, which we'll endure. Because, I mean, to recover the economy, in 5 years' time, we may look back and say, oh, by the way, there was once a period when we had load shedding for 2 years. But everything is now back on stream. Medupi is online. Busile is producing reliably, and all the other power stations are proper. So we need to get back to the state, and all the solar and wind are integrated into the transmission.
I want to come to that now, but before I get to the issue of IPPs, and a number of your panelists, notably Julius Malema, had some scathing things to say about IPPs as the next, with the next nuclear deal, basically, and us falling into the same trap of the state capture that saw Eskom collapse and saw all the inefficiencies. Do you think that there must be tougher action against business that's not paying their bills at Eskom, municipalities or state agencies? We saw this week that the Eskom threatened PRASA, so you're going to shut down your trains. And people argue that, no, but why are you going for PRASA? Because they are transporting our people. Now you always have that, right? Now you had your mayor who was your guest, and maybe you won't be able to be rude to him. He was your guest last week. He was marching with people who are refusing to pay. And so people are owing 18 billion. He marches with them to Eskom to say to Eskom, we don't want to pay your 18 billion. So there's an issue there about a tough action that's required. One of the roundtables we had here was with a couple of ex-Eskom people and commentators who I asked them, okay, pretend you're on the board, tell me what you're going to do. And one of the things that were raised was political interference. One of your business colleagues, who's the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, who I think sits on the board of Eskom, said the same thing in Parliament, that there's this interference. So people are owing 18 billion. You get a phone call that says, don't touch those people. Especially now, we are a year to elections. Can you just sum it up for me there? Is there something that must shift in the way that we deal with business that's not paying, municipal entities, etc., and then the role of leadership, both in business and government, in dealing with this thing from a noise perspective?
Well, my view is that the ANC, as the ruling party in the country, has got a huge responsibility to provide leadership, even matters of civic duty and civic responsibility. The ANC has done exceptionally well in terms of providing a safety net for the poor. It's come up with free this, free that. At the very least, the ANC should be the same party which says to the people of Soweto, you must pay for electricity. You must pay for services that are provided to you. You know that it's wrong that you don't pay and you don't expect power to be cut when you expect us to collect monies from Alexandra and Guamashu. What if they follow suit? There will be no government. There will be no nation state. It will collapse. So the responsibility is in the hands of the leader of society, the ANC. So it is not fair that as we are marching towards local government, that some among us are preferring to carry favors with people who are down and outright disobeying the law. Why? Because maybe they want to improve their chances come next elections. And this is not being personal here.
Sure.
But we have a responsibility as leadership to not tell the lies, to not claim victories, easy victories among our people. Because quite frankly, unless people pay for the services that are provided to them, there will be no services in future. All of this thing will collapse.
Absolutely, man. Sometimes it's just difficult to see these things unfolding, and these are basic things. If we're going to get this country right, everyone must sort of play their part. Let's talk about IPPs after the break. Right? Is it realistic in our context? We have seen how the economy is, the trajectory of the economy and so on, to actually think that we can replace, right, the current power issues with merely just talking about IPPs, merely just talking about solar, wind, etc. Sure. Right? Or must we be realistic about it? Because people are arguing, in fact, it's too expensive. And that's why there's then this narrative that says, oh, this is just a shortcut for some people to just get deals and what have you. I want to hear your view about that, and then to round off the conversation. Let's take a break now.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to inform the House that we now have preferred options for the establishment of a state bank, and we are ready to move now. The architecture will be that of a retail bank operating on commercial principles. The state bank will be subject to the Banks Act and will have an appropriate capital structure and performance parameters on investments and loan impairments. It will be regulated by the Prudential Authority on its own merits.
All right, we're running off our frank talk. It's Sandile Zungu. Before we get to the IPP, this state bank story, man, just 2 weeks ago, the land bank got a downgrade. Right? It's a full-on 100% owned bank by the government. You got IDC, which could be said as a pseudo bank, or Development Bank of Southern Africa. So you do have financial institutions owned by the state that are not performing at their optimum as we speak. No matter how you look at it, NEF has not been capitalized for the last 6 years, for example. Why a state bank? I mean, is this thing going to be even fly in your view?
Look, we can't be dismissive of everything that comes from government, especially when there's an obvious gap. The commercial banks, as we know them, in my opinion, they're not fulfilling their mandate vis-a-vis the SMME sector and black business. They're still very hostile to the interests of SMMEs, as well as black business. And when people go to the state and say, maybe come up with their own bank, that would be probably friendlier. It's because they're responding to a gap and an unfulfilled expectation. When black people talk about a black bank, it's because they're not entirely proud of what they see in front of them.
They're not accommodated. They don't feel accommodated.
So there's a gap. Notwithstanding this gap, if this bank will be run like another SOE, woe unto all of us. Because quite frankly, the track record of SOEs bar one or two exceptions, is pathetic, quite frankly. And so when the minister says it's going to be subject to Bank Act, it's going to be overseen by the Registrar of Banks, and it will be operated on pure commercial terms.
That's worrisome.
Maybe it's not entirely worrisome. These are caveats, but the taste will be in its eating. And therefore, we want to see how it's going to be governed, who will be the chairperson, who will he be reporting or she reporting to, and all those things which are governance related, which will give us some hope and promise. I don't want to be dismissive of the State Bank per se. The Land Bank, derating is a unique case. The NEF lack of capitalization is another unique case which must be addressed. But there's a gap for the State Bank. Incidentally, Itala Bank is a provincial state bank. The Post
that has done very well, as far as I know.
At face value, it has, but maybe it's not under the spotlight. And therefore, it could operate with its inefficiencies outside of the glare. But bring it to the center and throw them under this state bank and subject it to scrutiny. Probably something good will emerge out of it. So I'm not entirely dismissive of it, by the way.
Is state bank a euphemism for black bank or not? Should you be making sure something like African bank survives to be a black bank, something like VBS is revived to be a proper bank? I mean, I don't know what has happened to it, but something like that, mutual banks. Because, I don't know who was discussing this matter, but just an indication that in Nigeria alone there are over, maybe more than 400 banks, or some ridiculous amount of banks, right, compared to us. And I think the discussion there was, why complain about just an additional bank? There's a place with 1,000 banks, so that there's competition.
That's true. African Bank, for example, I must apologize, because when you talk about a bank, subject to Bank Act, you can't speculate about it in the media.
I see.
Notwithstanding, the facts are, African Bank is owned by the public servants through the PIC. It's owned by the Reserve Bank. And it's owned by, I think, 4 commercial banks who came to the rescue. The latter 4 banks own 25% as a whole. The other 75% is in the hands of, call it a state or quasi-state.
So that's a state bank.
Now,
all intents and purposes, man.
Now imagine if government was to say, let's come up with a combo of a state bank and black bank. By funding the acquisition of the 25% from the 4 commercial banks by a consortium of diverse black interests. And then what is owned by the Reserve Bank then is shifted to, for example, the PIC. We think something good could emerge there, and then that entity probably acquires the Italas of this world, Post Bank. Something good could emerge from there. So it's not to be dismissed completely.
No, that's truly very interesting. I mean, let's go back with the remaining time on the IPPs, man. What's your sense of what's going on? I'm sure you got better sense than if I were just to read in the paper about IPPs or listen to politicians shouting. What's happening there? Is it something to worry about? Is it something that's going to move the needle in as far as energy security is concerned?
Look, on the positive, the IPPs, if you exclude the thermal coal-based IPPs, let's just look at the renewables, solar, wind. They assist the country to be positioned as a responsible player in the issue of global warming. But the truth of the matter is that until there is technology to deal with voluminous and reliable storage
Yeah,
of
and
solar
storage.
power.
Storage is the big thing, isn't it?
You cannot rely on solar or wind for baseload.
Because you're waiting for the sun.
You're waiting for the sun,
And in
you're waiting for the
winter,
wind.
in rainy days, you are in trouble.
That's right. And the fact of the matter is that the first round of IPPs, second round, was very expensive. And what I'm told is that the costs are coming down, progressively coming down. Yeah. So let's give credit to that solar side. But the truth of the matter is that they are aggressive in terms of trying to create a space for themselves by rubbishing the base load, which is thermal coal-based. In terms of the what you call just transition, there's going to be a progressive move towards renewables, whilst at the same time maintaining the integrity of our reliance on coal. Remember, we have almost 300 years of proven reserves that could power us into energy security for quite a foreseeable future. And it's a blessing, it's not a curse from God. Let's actually nurture it by investing in cleaner technologies so that we can.
But what about the nervousness about corruption around this IPP story? What's your own sense there?
I don't have a view, quite honestly. I just don't have a view. I can say for a fact that I'm not a player in the IPPs.
All right.
And people that I trust impeccably are being mentioned on the corrupt equation. I would like to maintain my confidence in them, that possibly they're being besmirched and they don't deserve it. Notwithstanding, I think we need to remain vigilant as a nation.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's your sense of Eskom playing in that space? I think the Minister of Energy or Mineral Resources mentioning at the mining in Daba that the state may look at another SOE that will just focus on renewables that could either be, exist side by side with Eskom or be a subsidiary. I don't know the detail there, but what's your sense that you think Eskom must try and play in that space as part of its own strategy to complement its energy input into the grid?
Look, the trust deficit between government and the private sector manifests itself at times through this, that we must do it ourselves. We cannot have third-party players coming into the supply of energy. I believe that government must embrace private sector moving into the spaces which were traditionally the sole preserve of the state. Because it frees the capacity of the state in terms of its capital. Because that capital could be mobilized by the private sector on a basis that does not impugn the balance sheet of national treasury in terms of guarantees, etc. So there's got to be a need for a discussion around the table where Eskom appreciates that maybe there's a role for private sector, even on thermal coal in terms of IPPs, and there's a role for the private sector even in terms of renewables. But there's nothing wrong with Eskom saying, well, we just want to see what is best practice. We want to keep these third-party players honest by actually establishing ourselves through our own efforts what is really the cost of production, rather than being told by people who obviously are pushing their own agendas.
Your overall impression of where we're going as a country in terms of the economy, you're confident that we'll find a way?
The president is doing all the right things. He's making all the right moves. Like today, he was there to see the plane going to fetch our citizens from Wuhan. That's leadership. Even on the economy, he's doing all the right things, making the right appointments. But the biggest criticism is that the pace at which he's moving is what is called glacier pace. It's moving, but you can't see it. And unfortunately, the challenges that we are faced with don't deserve a chameleon's pace. They deserve haste. Otherwise, they will be drowned in our own tears. So it's about the pace, not the nature of the changes.
Yeah.
So even at legislative level, it takes far too long for a public discussion to be converted to a bill ready for the president's signature before a signature attaches his signature.
Absolutely.
So it's just far too long.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the nature of our challenges as a society, unemployment, inequality,
They are all a crisis
poverty,
and are all urgent now.
they are urgent, they are aggressive, they require aggressive response.
All right. Sandile, thank you so much, man, for always making the time to talk to us. All the best with the work you are doing.
Thank you very much.
You must come and talk about your business next time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sandile Zungu, the president of the Black Business Council, talking to us about all manner of things around the economy. Of course, you can continue to send us your views on #YourView on 405. Tweet us at JJ Tabane at Newsroom 405. Let's take a break now.